if I know that, I'll share it with you. And the reason I do that is because I believe that what we know as Indian people, that I thought that should be held only to us, I believe is a time that we people, all of us, regardless of color, should come together and really become the people that we were placed here on Mother Earth to be. So with that, if there's anything in particular that you'd like to know, this is your time. Anyone?
Tell us about you. What do you do? What vision in life is? What's your life like?
Okay. Anything else?
I'd like to hear more about what the Indian traditions are doing as far as their belief in what might be happening in the earth. We're hearing so many things, and I'm just wondering what the Indian society, their thoughts are at the moment.
Yes.
I'd like to hear about the shaman aspect of it.
Okay.
What you know.
I'm interested in all of those things.
Okay. Let me share some things with you about my life, then I'll move into that area as I go. Starting when I was a little boy, raised on the reservation, and hearing the stories that we were told to go to sleep were something that had to do with prophecy, something that had to do with history of the people, ceremonies. Our lives was very much different from perhaps how many of you were raised in the stories that your parents or either whoever raised you told you to put you to sleep. That's how we were put to sleep. And also that on about, I would say, the age of 6, 5 in that area, a strange thing happened to me. And to this day, I always alluded to the moon. And it happened on an evening, and I was small enough to stand inside a car. And we were driving to town with my father, my mother, and an uncle who just was newly married. And I could stand behind my father and look at the road as we're traveling. And it was full moon. And oftentimes I would look out the window and look at the moon. For some reason I did that to this day, I don't know. But to this day, I also believe that the moon got closer to me as I would look out there. And that's what attracted me, is that I would look out there and it seems to move a little closer towards me. So I get away and look at the road for a while. I will look out there again. It will move again. I'm not sure how many times I did this, but the last time this light came from there and it struck me inside the car, and it threw me over to the laps of the people that were sitting on the other side. And they didn't know what was happening to me or either what happened to me. And my father stopped the car, and I could see what was going on to me. It's like I was kind of up there in the sky or up there looking down at the car. I could come closer if I wanted to, or I could go back. And I saw how they tried to wake me up. And then we turned around. They turned this car around, and we drove back to our house. Then they took me inside, and they stuck pins in my feet and all that to see what reaction there would be. There wasn't any. And the same thing in the house. It was like I was at the corner kind of looking at what was going on. Then they wrapped me up in this blanket and took me to the hospital. And I woke up as I was being carried into the hospital. And after that, this little guy would come to me in my sleep. We were the same size. And I began to get afraid of him because he would want me to go with him. And So gradually I did. We began to go what I call out there in the universe. And he would make what I call power balls. He would create power, this energy balls out of his hands, and he would bounce it off certain planets, and that was our game. That's how he began to introduce me to the structure of how this universe is established. And there also, after this thing began to follow me in my sleep. Every time I go to sleep, that's what would happen. I began to get really afraid as a boy, and then I refused to go to sleep. I would lay there and not everybody else would asleep, I'd be awake. I got caught for doing that. My father caught me, and he asked me about it, so I told him that he would sit next to me. And because when I go to sleep, this little guy quit coming to me, but this, like a darkness would start following me. I became real afraid of that. And so my father would sit next to me until I go to sleep. Then sometimes I'll wake up, he won't be there. So somehow I realized that he won't be there when I wake up again. So one day or one evening, I let some kind of darkness engulf me. In my sleep, I'd be running away from this. I quit running. As it began to engulf me, this light began to show in there. A light began to get brighter and brighter and brighter. And it changed. After that, I was not afraid anymore. But what happened to the little boy was that it changed the way we used to play. And this time it was like, this is what God is. This is where it started from, and this is how it's structured. And it really showed me how, for instance, the things that came, what we know as Stonehenge, what we know as Easter Island, what those things were, what they really represent, is really a universal representative of the universe, if I put it that way. When I talk of since then, for the next, I would say 10, maybe close to 10 years, this went on. Then gradually, I moved into a different lifestyle. For the next 15 years, it left me. Then I changed my lifestyle again, the whole thing came back. And this time it had to do with ceremonies. In the early 80s, it was about ceremonies. And I had been involved in ceremonies from my childhood until probably about 8 somewhere. We moved away from there. I kept away from that for about a good 20 years and went back to it after Vietnam. Then the whole thing began to come back. This time it was about who can do ceremonies, how come they're done, where they're done, how they're done. I mean, the whole 9 yards about ceremonies and how they should be done. In the late 80s, it moved into earth changes as to what's to come, what's coming down, what's going on. So some of the questions that you ask me, I'll talk about that. I'll share those things with you. But first of all, let me share with you about ceremonies. And in the area where I'm raised at, from childhood, we were taught as to what runs in the family bloodline. We were identified by what family we belonged to. Names were not sort of immaterial. When people used to see me, they say, well, who are you from? So I would tell them, I'm from the Jackson family, and say, which Jackson? So I tell them. So that's how they identified me. And also in the village in which I was raised, in the area of Sakati, we were taught as to what family we should keep away from, which families were okay to play with, which to kind of be friendly with, all that because of what runs in the family. And talk about medicine in that way. There is such a thing as medicine. There is such a thing that I guess Indian people call it medicine man. Other people call it different things. I believe that it's universal. I believe that all races have these things in them. They're capable of it. And it bounces in the bloodlines. Just because I know what I know, just because I do ceremonies and how I do them, and what comes out of the ceremonies is beyond me. But what I have or what was given to me is not mine. I cannot train or either give it to my oldest son or anybody in there. I can teach them all what I know, but the essence of that, the very essence of what makes that work in ceremonies, may not be there. And that's the difference. In many ceremonies that are done today, some people got it, some people don't. What I mean by what families to kind of play with and what to kind of keep away from, what I mean is that, say for instance, this happened to the family. If I take medicine, create medicine with intent to either disrupt something or either injure somebody or devastate somebody, what if I take it and aim it towards this lady here? If this lady is very well together, mind, soul, all together, she would know it exactly. She would notice, she would feel it as something hit her, because this thing is going to go towards her. If she's all together, she can sense that. And if she's really, really gifted well together, what's going to happen with her, her aura is going to cushion that. It's like a pillow, just one layer after a layer, depending on the strength of that. And it'll buffer that. You'll buff the whole thing. And although she may stagger, you'll not penetrate. That's her own protection. But if she does, she is not centered. You'll go right through it. She'll never know the difference. Then she began to feel a little illness of some type. And if she's wise enough, she's going to go to this other family and ask, say, her, tell me what's wrong with me. Is something happening to me? The way we do it back home is by tobacco. There's people that's gifted. They'll roll this tobacco with prayer, meditation, take a deep puff of that and put it on her. It's like giving her a whole x-ray and pinpoint exactly what's in her. And may tell her, this is what's on you, but I'm not capable of taking it off. You go see this other woman or this other family. So she goes over there. They know what's going on. Through ceremony, they remove her. Then they'll tell her, if you wish to retaliate, you go see this other family. She goes over there if she wants to send this back to me. She's obligated in the same way I am as anybody to do that. So to us, these things are just opposites. There's no such thing as right and wrong, good and evil. They're just opposites. And it's her obligation to send that back to me, where it came from. Other than that, it's neutralized. That's the kind of environment I was raised in as a child. So I know these things. I've seen them. And so now talking about who can do ceremonies. A lot of us were gifted that way. And I've seen so many people as, in my younger years, that what people call vision quests. I've also seen how they look like when they go out there. Some get it, some don't either. Just because somebody's been into a vision quest doesn't mean anything. You can tell by their behavior if they have it. There's only one reason that people go into a vision quest for, and that is to seek the wisdom of the power of God. Not the power of the wisdom, but the wisdom of the power of God. That's why they do it. And there's different ways that it's done. In some most cases, it takes a mentor or somebody to tutor this person to get him to a point or her to a point where she can be able to or he can be able to do that. And in 82, for the first time in my life, I went into that. And every 3 years thereafter, I went into it. And in there, it really taught me something. And I've seen people how they look like the ones that got it, but I never could really say what happens to them until I actually went through it. And for those of you people that's from the Phoenix Valley, it's right on top of the Estrella. And it's real high. And nobody was up there with me except me. And there's something out there. I sense that there's something out there before, but there's something out there, what people know as spirit. The spirit and the soul are not the same. The spirit is the food that the soul needs to feed, to grow spiritually. They're two different things. And spirit is a part of God, but it's not God. It's a part of God. And when that comes to the mind, to the soul, to the body, a fourth source, if I put it that way, a fourth thing comes in. And what happens to the individual, what it makes the individual do is that it enables that person to see visions here in the mind. Exactly detail by detail as to what this is going to be, that person's gift. Everything is explained. Then I understood at that time that we were only created to survive materialistically through the five senses. That's all we were created to do. The body cannot differentiate from fantasy from reality. The mind is not in control. It is the soul that is in control. In the same way that when you exercise physically, your physique is nourished, grows. When you get educated, or either you become very intellect in some ways, or you think a lot, you begin to understand things. The soul has the right also to its own expression. And all the mind can do is give you options. Like when you go home from here, you can either fly, walk, swim, crawl, however it is. And what you're supposed to do is take those options and fill them out with your soul. What feels right, you do. That way, your soul began to dominate. That way, you go by how you feel rather than how you think or what you think. And if you really move deeper into it, you'll drive from here to your house without even knowing how you got there. The space between your thoughts began to expand. That's where it's at. And also when I talk about we were created only to survive materialistically, is that when the gift is given, people also have the right to refuse it if that's what they want. I could have just said, okay, cool, God, that's okay, and leave this alone. I would have stopped there, but people like me, we say, because maybe we're naive, we think it's a great thing. We say, oh, sure, God, I'll do this for you. And once you say that with your heart, you become representative of God here on Mother Earth. For those of you who have Christian backgrounds, When you're in trouble or when you find yourself in a position where you don't like to be, you need to ask yourself a question like, if Jesus Christ was in my place, what would he do? Something like that. And also, with that gift that I speak about, what happens is that the puzzle, everything fits together. You see the whole picture now of what life is all about and what it can be and why you're here on Mother Earth. And how you maintain that is almost if you get that and God says to you, says, here, and you put it in your pocket or you put it in your heart, the only way you can keep that is by becoming traditional. That's the only way. What I mean by traditional, it's not a bandana, not beads, not anything like that. It's in the heart. The same principles that Christianity advocates. That is what we have in common worldwide. The very same principles. When I talk about bandanas, when I talk about how we do things, that's customs of people. That's where we Indian people differ from each other, is in our customs. Customs are language, food, methods of ceremony, methods of prayer. These things we differ from tribe to tribe. Culture is today, what's available to us today. So when I listen to other Indian people speak about Indian culture, in many cases they're actually speaking about their customs. This is what we do back home. This is how we do it. And if you were to move into this, you need to understand that there are traditions, there are principles, customs are things that we do, culture is what's available. And many speakers do not differentiate that, and I like to differentiate those things, that way you understand what you're getting into. So in that way, that's how I began to really understand that that's how we keep that. If I go out there and act crazy, if I lose that, I don't know if I'll get it back. That I don't know. And I'm talking about people who go on vision quest are different from people who are born this way. There are some of us who are just born this way. They cannot help but be who they are. If they don't do what they're doing, then things fly, things happen to them in the same way things would happen to me if I don't do it. It's almost as, the medicine men, spiritual people like that, it's sort of like they're riding in a car and they're not the driver of that car either. And sometimes when they step out of that car and don't act and don't behave in the manner that they're supposed to, then trouble comes their way, either to their families, and gradually you'll come to them if they don't heed to their gift. And oftentimes they themselves cannot get themselves back in the vehicle. We have to do it. Some of us are capable of putting them back in there. But those of us who are just getting our gifts from Vision Quest, I don't know if we lose them, if we can get them back. That I don't know. So there's people out there who are gifted that way from birth. That's how they choose to come into this plane at this time. A lot of us who are here today, we choose to be here. Each one of us have our own responsibility. Each one of us play a role in the order of things to each other. Let me talk about, did I somewhat answer your question about shamanism? That's what that is shamanism, what I spoke about. If you want it that bad, understand what it is. So if you get it, then it may not be a gift anymore. It is something that you must do from that point. A lot of us believe in the same way that I have a lot of friends who are sun dancers, pipe carriers. A lot of people think when they pick up that pipe that they become the road that they're on becomes wider. They get more status. No. They go at the bottom of the totem pole. They are at service to the people. The road gets really narrow. There are some things they cannot do anymore that they used to. They must live up to that creed. Things like that, people need to really look at these things. When I talk about the universe and how that is structured, if we look at like the universe in terms of like an egg, vision another egg next to it. Vision in that egg next to us. All the things that you see in our universe lumped into one big mass. That thing in there, that thing in there goes counterclockwise. If we apply that to Earth years, one circle takes 6,666 years to be one big turn. As it goes next to us, the vibrations of that causes the planets to realign itself. To us, Earth changes. And this happens often. And we're coming to that really soon also. In the way that this universe is structured, each planet is like, they serve a purpose to the souls, the people who have gone before us. And when somebody leaves here, somebody's time to go. There's a thing to astrology a lot more deeper than what people think. The time that you come here to Mother Earth, the exact time, the space that's within the pie, as that angles in, the soul come in. If you can break that formula, if people can break that formula into the time that you're born, the year, the whole thing, you can also know exactly when it's your time to go. I've known only one person that is capable of doing that in my life, that can be able to do that. I haven't met anybody else that can. I know people that know astrology, but they don't know as deep as that. When somebody leaves here, if you look on ceremonies, especially sweat lodges, in front of them, there's this staff that's there. On there are different colors of ribbons, tobacco ties, different colors. Vision at the center of Mother Earth. From that center, what you may call portals, going out, several of them. Several of them, different colors also. People come through there, people go out of there, depending on spiritual growth. In levels of the hierarchy of God, God, Dead Center, 23 level, if I put it that way. If you were to look at the levels, what people call planes, from 1 to 10, karma. People have, each soul, earth time, has 1,777 years earth time. How they spend that earth time is their business. Okay. That's the time given to us to reach level 10. Okay. So if you go into and you die at level 7, you come back. unless you run out of time. Then the source that goes between the palm of your hand to the other palm of your hand, that makes your soul, is split in half. Universal law. I asked that some time ago, why and where do they go? They go into a certain area, and some of them do make it back because of what people think. So from 1 to 10, karma. The whole thing is based on karma. And also at certain levels, planets play a role into that plane. So for instance, when you die, you really want to know what love is all about. You go to Venus and you mesh yourself with that type of feeling, that type of essence, to get kind of like polishing your soul off and all that kind of stuff. And then you meditate. Then you decide when to come back again and try it again. From 11 to 13, these are the planes that people like to talk about, especially Christians talk about heaven. That's that area there. This is also the planes upon which people that have guides, this is where they're from. And these guides, angels, however, what is based upon your beliefs, what you believe. If you have this strong feeling of Indianness in you, you're going to see an Indian guide. Or if you have a very strong Christian belief, you're going to see an angel. They come to you so not to frighten you. And these are souls who have lived with you over time. And these are souls that do this because you are a relative to them at some point, or they're your friend. Only two reasons why they do that. And 14 to 22, ET country. That's then God. So once somebody goes beyond 14, you have no contact with them. So here, and not to disintegrate any kind of beliefs, but the Michael Archangel type souls who have never reincarnated to earth will blow you apart if you communicate with them. It's not possible. You're not strong enough. The soul, the body is not strong enough. If you ever look at a light bulb, you put so much current, you'll just break. That's what's going to happen. You only have contact with other souls if they wish to contact with you in those three levels. That's the hierarchy of God. That's how that is structured in that way. A lot of what people call ETs, they're souls. You're looking at the Great Communion coming pretty soon. And the reason that they look like that is because they don't use the same portals that people who come here to reincarnate, or people who die to leave here, they don't use the same. They use the atmosphere. And with the atmosphere, it's like thought. They have an ability to reintegrate and disintegrate matter. They have to integrate a vessel in order to penetrate the atmosphere of the earth, the density of the earth. They have to keep that on in order to be here, to be visible to you. They can also disappear. And a lot of them come here to see how you're doing. That's what all those writings are about in the fields. It's based on universal language, and it also talks about the 8 dimensions that surrounds Mother Earth in that way. Call them consciousness, whatever you may call them. These things in the fields, they're actually warnings to the Earth people because of what we do. What we do affects them. What we do with our atmosphere, like the ozone and that kind of stuff, it also takes theirs apart. And so that's what they try to warn us about. Don't do this, or either be careful with your earth. This is all you got. This is what we're about. That's all they're trying to tell us. If you vision Mother Earth like an orange, with all this, you peel an orange off, see all these little slices that have. All 12 of them, in the same way, the same things that you see on Stonehenge, the same way on Easter Island, they're representative of that. Everything faces the motherland of spirituality, on which is now Easter Island. Before this cycle, that was the motherland of spirituality in that area, which part of it was Hawaii, coast of California, parts of South America. It's one big piece of land in there. That's where my people is from, the southern Arizona tribes. They're of that. The tribes of Apache country on this way, they're descendants of Atlantis. Two different people. What happened to the American Indian is a result of what happened to the people they were when they were Atlantis. Race karma. That's what that is. And so that's, everybody have to pay their dues, in other words. In the same way, probably next time, Caucasian time. So I feel no way about history because of that. I'm not here to judge anybody. It's not my role. Nobody told me when I was born, you're here to do this. Nobody said anything like that. So in that way, divided, the earth is divided that way. Each one have a responsibility in the same way of the hierarchy of God. Each one, like I talked about the Michael Archangel type spirit, soul, each have a responsibility. The people that you call guardian angels are actually your relatives. They're the ones that lived with you in this lifetime, and they're the ones that try to tell you, hey, balance your checkbook when you forget about things like that, or pay your bills, or either they come to you to help you out in hard times, like a relative dies, and you're grieving, is to help you through the rough spots, in other words. You're not supposed to rely on them. You're supposed to do it yourself. Because if you rely on a lot of these things, you're not doing what you're here to do. You're not handling it yourself. You need to go through it. They're there just to give you a little break to help you out, then you're supposed to go on again. The angels I spoke about earlier are the ones I talk about in levels 11 through 13. Then the people that's like the archangel type characters, they never were incarnated. They stayed close to God. They never have to. When I talk about what happens on Mother Earth as a result of what happens next door to us, it happens every cycle. In the next millennia, a millennia of peace, your children, our grandchildren, will also have a sixth sense. With each cycle, the human race gains one sense. In the previous cycle, we had only 4 senses. At that time also, water was thinner, air was thicker. People were able to do those things, walk on air, that type of stuff that people can walk on water these days. And another thing, when I talk of Earth's changes, the several portals that I spoke about, in the early 90s, I would say from 92 to about 95 in that area, there was what I call a window of opportunity, if I put it that way. In other words, the human family had a time to get itself together and to really come together as one human family. And what's going to happen won't be that devastating. And we didn't. We were not successful in doing that. So from about 95, there was a speed, the speed of time began to, it's like the momentum started to pick up. Things started to happen fast. And you'll be like that for another 2 years until the end of this year. If you miss the train, you got time to do a lot of introspective things. Hop on the train as it's at full speed. Next year, you'll be right on it. And also karma. It used to be where there was a grace period regarding karma. It's like you do something to somebody, and if you were naive, there was a grace period. You can get away with it. If you knowingly do something to somebody, there was even a slight grace period. Now there isn't. What you do, it'll come right back to you. It is not handling karma in the next lifetime anymore. That door closed. So now we deal with our own karma today. When I talk about earth changes, when I talk about going back, and this little guy came back to me, we were again the same size. And when I talk about ceremonies in that way, a couple of guidelines that I learned from this guy is how the person feels. And I tell that to people when I do ceremonies: if you don't feel right with me, don't go in here. If there's something about me that you disagree with, if you just don't feel right, don't bother. Save yourself the trouble. Don't even go. It has to do with how the person feels. And also, in the same way, if you're listening to somebody praying, feel it. If that person is truly coming from the soul, you will feel it. If it's just words, that's all there is. You feel nothing. And you can feel this in ceremonies. If you sit in a sweat lodge, you can feel the changes, not because of the people, but because of the person conducting the ceremony. That's the responsibility of that person. And if you're naive, they're going to say, oh, it's because of you that this, Oftentimes, some of us Indians, we do that. We like to shove the blame on somebody else. But it's really our own. It's whoever does the ceremony. And also, there's a simple purification ceremony. When I talk of the sweat lodge, we have our own method of purification in the area where I'm from. Every tribe have their own. When the sweat lodge kind of became predominant here and there, those of us that do ceremonies from different tribes, we've had to take the time to learn the structure of it and how it's structured. But we're not necessarily trying to become Lakota, because I am not. I don't intend to be. I'll never be. I was not born that way. I respect the people. I respect their contribution. And that's where I stop. And so each one of us have our own type of ceremony. If you go into southern Arizona, it's individual. If there's people going to do a ceremony with you, they want to do a healing one on you, what they'll do is that they'll light a fire on the ground. And they'll let that fire go on for maybe about 3 days. Then after that, they'll let it burn out. They'll make a whole circle using the ashes. Put like a pyramid in the middle. Dig a groove in there and put the dirt, use that to make the pyramid. Wrap you up in some cloth, put you in there with your head sticking out. Bury you that way, so far, so deep. Put all the singers on one side. Only the conductor of the ceremony will be in there. Put different people at different places and do the ceremony on you that way. That's one way of doing it. And so I have these dreams, is what I'm saying. I see things in visions from childhood as a result of what happened to me. And when I talk of earth changes, if you like to have beach property, stick around Sedona in a few years, you have beachfront property. Same with Phoenix, same with Tucson, same with El Paso, straight down to the Gulf of Mexico. Same way with Denver, kind of like curve a little way like this towards Medford, Oregon. 99, you see a whole new world. Before 98 goes, you'll see some changes in California, and I think that's what's going to start it, is that you're going to see some earthquakes, you're going to see some volcanoes happening through, starting from South America, right, a chain up all the way up to the coast. You're going to see some storms that you've never seen before. It's all natural. It's just a natural part of things. When the earthquake goes, give it a little time, or either when the volcanoes and the earthquakes start, give it a little time. You have relatives in California. Hopefully they'll get out. I see bumper-to-bumper traffic on I-10, and being, I'm much more of a business person. And I used to tell people, if you're going to make money, if you're into the private entrepreneur area, go sell these people some water. Put some stands by the freeway because they're going to need it, bumper-to-bumper traffic. And tent, or either shacks, Shack City, or either Tent City, whatever you call it. There's one in this area somewhere that I look at. Because after this, when parts of California goes, if you look at from the Baja straight towards on about San Francisco, there's a real cut there. You'll go first part of this to go. And I sense that when I see it, there's no time, there's no future, there's no past when it comes to visions like that. All I can try and be able to tell is what's around in that vision, what's there. And the only thing that comes back to me is before 1998, you will see that. And also when I talk of this area, through the same area where I live at, as being gone, I see myself standing about several miles, 15 miles from where I live at, southwest of where I live at, pointing to somebody standing next to me, telling this person, oh, that's where I used to live at, it's nothing but water. Parts of South Mountain is there, a little small piece of the Estrella, and it's all water. And I'm telling this person, if you like to go there, you have to go all the way, pointing towards Florence, Arizona, walk all the way around there. And also, in this time, you see a lot of people having throat problems. Here, a lot of them. A lot of people think they have colds. It's not. It's the vibrations of the earth began to change. A lot of what you call the God eye, they have different meanings for that. This is where it's at. It has to do with if you look at the Kundalini in that way, look at that level, it has to do with this. It's starting to open up. And so a lot of people are starting to have coughing, feel like they have a cold or cough. When these changes are completed by 99 or either 2001, everything will be in place. At that time, when I talk about those portals, you only have 3. 4 of them are going to close. People with a higher, or either people coming from a higher level in the levels of 1 to 10, up, say like 7 or 6 on up, if I put it that way, 6 to 9, they can only reincarnate. The people below that will go somewhere else. Souls will go somewhere else. So you have people with only 3 portals, people with a higher or less karma coming into this earth, thereby creating a millennia of peace. The grandchildren that we have, or the people, the little people saved from about, I guess, would be below 14 at this time, they're starting to develop a 6th sense already. And their children will be born like that with a 6th sense, what I call mind talk. And then you will be looking at the millennial peace that we talk about. All Indian prophecy ends at 2000 across the Western Hemisphere. Everything. And I used to wonder why. Why does it end there? But it's because of that. Everything is in place. A lot of us that are here today, we have a role, like I talked about. We have a role to play. On about 1984, in that area, looking at the earth from a distance, I saw this little flash that went on in the Florida area, somewhere in the Carolina area, another one in Nebraska or somewhere in that area, a couple right above China, one real above Russia, a couple, there were several of them, in other words, worldwide. And later on I found out that these are sort of the vanguard of the movement that's supposed to happen. These are the people, some of these are very prominent people, business people, who now speak about earth changes publicly. If you really looked into their background, on about 84, you'll find that something happened to them. Either they lost everything they've got, their family, or they have nervous breakdowns, things happened. See, we people are not suited to handle these guys that we speak about. It takes training to do that. They have to. I watched a friend of mine go through this in about a 2-year period. And she's been to psychics. Psychics used to tell her, well, there's this Indian guy standing over you all the time. So she always talked about this Indian guy. And she began to talk to that Indian guy in the same way as she talks to God or to anybody. And things began to happen with her. One time she got a rash all over her body, just all of a sudden it just happened. And she laid there in pain for about a couple of days or so, then it went away. Doctors don't know what happened with her. The other time was all just pain in her body, and I watched this lady cry around. She don't know what was going on. Doctors don't know. Then she began to have dreams of this guy, this Indian guy. Then she began to see, she began to see this giant birds, like she says to me. One time she said, Pete, is there such a thing as all people? Says, I saw this big one looking at me through my window, that kind of stuff. And finally, it came across, the whole thing, the spirit that she always had, I guess, washed over her, came right through her. And it became very apparent because she can now talk to that spirit just like you and I are talking. And I had a chance to do the same thing because she called me one time and says, come over here and tell me that I'm not crazy, because that's what happened. And so I asked this spirit that she talks to different questions that I only know. And what I know is how we began to validate that this is okay. And also we began to find out that that's what it takes. That all the pain, all the things that she was going through is in a way preparing her for that spirit to be able to do that. If it wasn't for all that, it's not possible. So there's a little pain here and there to get where you're going. And so as these portals close, you have only 3. And then the second, when I talk about the first, what I call the vanguard, I saw there were several people that was to be in the forefront of this whole thing. Then from there on, there's either 20 or 22 behind each one of them. Those are people that talk about all these nice things that, hey, this is what's going on, earth changes, this is what's going on. From there on, it'll double, another maybe about 40 or 40-some people that's going to come in. If you look at somebody like me in that way, there's probably about 40 after me that's going to do the organization. and put this thing together. Then the ones double those, then you see the people that's going to establish the next foundation of the next millennia. So that's what I mean. Every one of us have a role in this. So that way, each one of us is unique. Each one of us is gifted in our own way. This is more my gifts I'm sharing with you, and I respect what you have also. And there's some also that's here just to be what I call writers at the time, because they're the ones that has already chosen when it's time, they're going back. Some of them are not returning either. So I share these things with you not as a means to scare you or anything like that, or to disrupt anything that you may have as beliefs. I respect those. Those are just what I know and what I'm sharing with you. Is there any questions, that clarification or something? Yes.
What can you tell me, or what do you know about Mount Venezuela?
Let me talk about this area. Let me talk about just Mother Earth in that sense. If you vision like how a spider has this web, they're not all the same, but they have similar design. If you vision something like that over Mother Earth, as each crossing is like a hook to Mother Earth. That's part of how Sedona is what it is because of that. And what people do in prayer, in ceremony, affects that. In the same way, what people do here and somebody's over there where you're talking about, if they hook that up, it affects them. So it's not so much the area, is how they hook up. So there's certain areas, in other words, that call them, I don't know if vortex is the right name, I don't know. But it's just like they hold that up. They're like, I guess you would look at like foundations. If you build a house, there's certain foundation in the same way as that. That's how you look at that, certain areas. And if you go to a certain place and you really say, like, people like to smudge each other. Okay. If you take somebody, like you come here and you smudge me, you don't know what I'm carrying. I don't know what you're carrying either. So I'd be better off doing it myself. But whereas if I were to allow you to do that, so either you get rid of it that way, or either you get rid of it that way. If it's that way, you need to move me to the side when it's over and clean that area before you put somebody else in there. In the same way, if you clean an area, you really purify an area, it spreads out, is what I'm saying. This is what hooks up to that foundation. And if it's something that you cross, or either somewhere in that area that something like that is happening, you will feel it. So it's not so much the area, it's what happened there, or who somebody did something there. If you look at, when I talk about spirit in the soul, spirit comes in levels. Most people that wanted to grow spiritually, they appeal to a higher level, and it's a source that is just there continuously, and the more you use it, the more it becomes. And when I talk about that being a part of God, what I mean is that the space between things, between you and I, and were you to talk about that in terms of soul, spirit, God, you vision a little like this. Go back to the way the battery on your car is. There's a positive, there's a negative. They have a little one line, and there's a little line like this. Vision that is coming one of those, another line, another one, another one. And it's a vibration. It's a vibration that happens. If scientists could ever look at it that way, and they'll break that. They can be able to look at that way. That's what makes it. That's what holds the space between you and I, is that. In the same way, the lining inside your body, you may have your body, but underneath your skin is a lining of light. It comes from the soul. It's the spirit, and it feeds off the soul. And it's what keeps the soul inside your body. And if you ever look at moving that, that's the reason when people leave their bodies, they have to use the light to do that. Then you really look at the light and you really focus on that light. You see that light coming back to you, and pretty soon you see a little thing like a thread or a rope coming through there. That's what you focus, and you put yourself on the whole body, your whole soul pops out. That's how they do it, because of what's underneath your skin. Yes.
What are your feelings regarding any energies that you may feel coming to you? And I'm not saying you personally, but people that are sensitive may all of a sudden feel that there's an energy that's surrounding them in a situation, and are not too sure how to deal with it. And there's many thoughts out there how to do it. So in order to protect one, to not get caught up in that, what would be your suggestion?
When you pray, as anybody, this is what when I was taught how to pray as a child, we were taught to vision, to see, to vision what we are saying as we are saying that. Okay. In the same way, were you to protect yourself, you need to see that. You need to see protecting yourself, whatever you put around you that can be able to do that. If you have faith and you believe in that, it will protect you. Nothing will penetrate that unless you allow it. If you don't do that and you're just wide open, you can walk anywhere and you can pick things up. And also, if you have, like when I talk about opposites, if you're one of those great, soft-hearted type people, and you're not really that strong as a person, not as a soul, but as a person up here, because of the way you think, not so much the way you feel. So when you walk over and somebody zaps you, it's like a magnet, you just draw it. They don't give it to you, you draw it. Because it attracts you. Opposites attract each other. So that's what I mean when you really become all together mentally, soul-wise, physically, then you want to be around people, or people who are like you will naturally want to be around you. Does that kind of make sense? Did I answer your question, how you deal with that? And if you were to get rid of that, you do it the same way. You vision that leaving you. All of it. You have to think of yourself in terms, not just your hand, but all of you. On the top of your head, from your soul, the strength of your soul, the level of your spiritual growth, and what you speak colors the way you're, let me rephrase that. The level of your soul spiritually, how you are thinking, and what you are saying, if you were to talk. If you're not saying, but how you're thinking, is the color of your aura. So for people who see auras, they can tell when somebody's speaking the truth at a distance by the color of what comes out, by the color of their... And that's what protects you, is your aura, is what I'm saying. You have to look at your whole thing, your whole body, or either you're like a little shell, envision yourself clearing that out, leaving it. Then you go back to, it's like kind of what I call sweeping your house, something like that. Then you can get rid of it. And you have to really be careful, like I talked about, if you ever, you have to be in the moment to do that. You have to be in the moment to feel it. If somebody throws something at you, you can feel it. Yes?
But not all energies are negative or opposite.
That's what I'm saying. If you really are together, if your mind, your heart, when we talk, when Indian people talk about heart, actually what they're talking about is their soul, not just the beating. If your heart, your mind, your body is all together, then people like you would want to be around you. Is what I'm saying. Same energy. If you are not together somewhat, then the opposite type attracts you. Yes.
When I was 21, I gained awareness, scientific awareness. And for the last 20 years, I can do things with it, changing other people, good or bad, depending on my feelings at that moment. So I met her, and she said, why don't you do something good with it?
Mm-hmm.
Novel idea. But I've worked on improving it for a long time. At this stage, sometimes during a bad moment, right? Sometimes others are not protected when I get mad.
Yeah.
And it's what I would like to do is now to learn some self-control so that I can not have this negativity coming out and have this just kind of this continual positive and helpful inside and out, both spiritually and consciously, subconsciously and consciously.
Okay.
If you could guide me on that, it'd be kind
Start with by going how you feel.
That's all right.
Start by going by how you feel. Just go by how you feel rather than what you think. Go by how you feel. And if you really want to, when you do that, you're going to touch something. When you go by how you feel, you're going to be in touch with you. And when something comes about, you're going to feel it. And then when you feel it, it's not what happens that matters. It is what you do with it that counts. In other words, work it out. When you work that out, you have to, as you feel, as you go by how you feel, it is like blending in with what's around you. It's like almost asking yourself, like, what do I need to change within me in order to be in harmony with what's out here, rather than trying to change everything out here to be in harmony with you, but reverse that. Then that way you get discipline to the point where you don't need discipline, where you just become as is. Everything just becomes is, and there's no need for discipline. You just go with how you go with the flow, or how you put it. Just go with the natural order of things. There's no need to control. If you can relinquish that kind of control, it'd be great. You know, if you can relinquish all kinds of control, you're pretty much there. You know. This world is set funny. The way we see things is not really the way it is. That's the illusion in which we were created to look at. And this, what I mean is that for some of us that pray, you know, we always want to go up there. We want to look up this way. We were taught as children that when we pray and if we wanted to get closer to God, the deeper we go down this way, the better we understand what's up there. Is to really work these things out that we have. Some call them personal issues, whatever they may be. That's the only way you can really get there. There's no shortcuts. You just have to work them out, feel them out, talk to somebody. Any other questions or any?
As a Vietnam vet, do you find yourself working with Vietnam veterans? I know a lot of them have come back.
No. No, I don't. It took me years to identify myself as a Vietnam vet, let me just put it that way. I left Vietnam in 1970, and I was down there for a few years or so. And it wasn't until like 90, 20 years later, I was able to actually publicly or either say to myself, yeah, you are a vet. And a lot of us, yeah, we came back with problems. A lot of us was able to work them out. Some of us weren't able to. And I know what they're saying. Some of them come and talk with me sometimes. And it's, when I talk about things, opposites, what I mean by that is that when something happens in your life, don't look at what happened. Look at what is happening here. That is what the gift is all about. That is for you to work out. And in the same way, when you talk about Vietnam vets, a lot of people died on both sides. And a lot of people that died as a result of me being there is their gift to me, what happened to me here. And if it wasn't for those people, I would have never been where I'm at today. It's their gift to me. It was me that has to work that out from here. If it wasn't for them, I wouldn't know what was in here before. That's what I'm saying. And not just that, but in life also. And I'm talking about life and the way things were shown to me. Like if you want to be with somebody, a lot of us like to think of that person, and being that person's with you all the time, then you wonder how come that person doesn't want to be around you. Because you always have that person there anyway. Now, if you don't think about that person, it creates a vacuum here. It's what draws that person. You have to think in that way. Right? That's what I mean. It's the dynamics of the situation in which we are placed to work our stuff out. And there's some other things that I can cover for you if I can, or either there's more questions.
I have a question, but I'm not quite sure how to phrase it. We were talking about the different levels of energies or entities or whatever you want to come back and forth. We've noticed around our property in the last number of years, at first I thought I was just hallucinating. Things darting around, and then they began taking more form and more form. And then my partner began to see them as well, and other people come around, and it's like they're solidifying more and more. And Norm says, I think they're just like it here, and they want to just hang out here. You know? And I'm not sure, I don't know whether it's wise to try to, so far I've just adopted a neutral attitude. It's like, oh, okay, there's another one.
Yeah. See what's going on with people today. It's always been that way. Let me put it that way. It's always been that way, but the time that is here, what's happening with people is that they're starting to get a little more spiritual than ever, if I put it that way, before, because of the speed of time and what's going on with them. Either it's almost like forced in many ways. People are forced to grow spiritually. People are starting to have visions. People are starting to see things that are not there. They're starting to see, like if you look back, you were so sure that somebody was standing there, that type of thing. And a lot of ET type people are starting to come to people's homes, around where they live at. And a lot of us have this sense of wanting to go live somewhere else, like relocate to another spot. And a lot of people are having dreams of people that were related to us but are dead already. I mean, a number of things is going on now. And when I talk about mind talk, the things that you mentioned that you believe that you see, these are the things that our grandchildren are going to be able to talk with in the same way you and I are talking today about what I call mind talk. They can talk with each other as before. A lot of the things that I mentioned in the previous cycle, a lot of us say the pyramids down south of us here, they're not all made by human people. I mean, they're made by human people, but with the help of spirit people, if I put it that way. They were able to communicate with each other that way. That's the same way we're moving towards again. It's that way, to be able to tap into their abilities and for them to show us this is how you do it. A lot of what you see part of rooms or either replicas of something here on this earth are not really made by us, but they're made with the assistance with them. That's the great communion that I speak of, is to be able to communicate with those people. And it's coming. And also a lot of us are going to get there. One day you just wake up and that's the way it's supposed to be for you. It's either whether you like it or not, if you're on that, if that's what you choose to be during this lifetime, you put some effort to it, you will get there. And also, age doesn't mean anything. I've known, there's a thing on my reservation where I'm from, a lot of the women, more than the men, are really heading this way. A lot of them are more becoming, I guess I would use the word medicine-y type people, ceremonial people, people that, women that talk with spirits, or spirits talking with them, showing them things more than they are men at this time. It's almost like 4-to-1 or something, that ratio. It's a lot more. I don't know why. I just figure if that's the way it's supposed to be, then that's the way it's going to be. You know, who's going to argue about that? Yes.
Doesn't the spiritual involvement of the human beings on this earth, like the grander and greater that grows, doesn't that minimize some of these terrible prophecies and earth tragedies that are supposed to happen? I've heard that they minimize, they can change some of these terrible disasters.
They had a window. We, the human family, had our window on about between 92 and 95 in that area. There was that window. That window is closed. All we can do is just write it out. And there is no such place as a safe place either. Everybody's supposed to be where they're supposed to be. And if you really listen to your heart, you'll be where you're supposed to be. And this is the hard part because, you know, I often talk to people and they say, oh, my friends live in California and they don't want to relocate. Or my parents live in California and they don't want to leave. I don't know what to do. Those are some of the things, that's what I meant, that some people have made their choices already. That's the choice that they made even before they came here. This is how they choose to go. And that has to be respected. That has to be left alone. Like I said, if people listen to their heart, they're supposed to be where they should be. And this happens all the time. This happens when I talk of a cycle. When I was a kid, I used to talk about, ask questions like, well, how long is one cycle? when I talk of cycles, I'm not going to talk about, there's no differentiation between, like the flood, when that happened. A cycle according to part of the cycle, not the whole cycle, but part of the cycle, for regarding human evolvement or spiritual evolvement, Earth years was 1,144 years, based on the Aztec calendar. That's what came back to me, was that. Because I asked the same question where I was from, where did you get this number at? The people from southern Phoenix on down, Salt River Indian Reservation on down, all the way down to Peru, through there to Hawaiians, where we're all one people at one time, we're the same root family, which you call a root race. And there were 5 races in one root race. That's the brown race that disappeared. That's the brown race that's coming back again. And when I used to wonder about how the brown race was come about, it comes back through after Earth changes, when the Earth tilts, when the Earth is not going to be in the same place where it's at right now. The new North Pole will be between South America and Hawaii. It's going to tilt. And the temperature is going to change. There's not going to be this cold weather. Everything is going to be about 74 somewhere worldwide for a long time. And also, pretty soon there'll be no colors of people. There'll be no black people. There'll be no yellow. There'll be no red. There'll be no white people. Everybody's just going to become the same color. One brown race. That's what I'm talking about. Is that in the next millennia? Yes.
Talked about prophecies, but have you personally felt in the last few days in the past?
That's what we were laughing about, like we're saying, what's going on this week, Yeah, it is. It's
It's like something's going to happen this week. I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
What? Something.
You're going to see some weather patterns, changes. I guess one of the, yes.
I don't know, I'm very frustrated. So then, sending prayers to the earth, sending love and goodness to other people, and moving on that front, doesn't make any difference anymore? Is that what
It makes a difference. What I'm saying, it makes a difference. Your prayers energize the earth. It heals the earth. It heals people. It helps people. But what's going to happen at the speed, at the rate, at the depth, is not what's going to change. Is that?
So it can help to heal the Mother Earth, it can help to heal and uplift people, but it's not going to minimize the disasters.
Exactly. But if you pray for people, like I said, prayer helps people. You may raise their spirituality or their consciousness to be where they're supposed to be. If you look at it that way, so it's not that it's meaningless or anything like that. Everything helps.
So when again did you say that window closed at 95?
95. I was on about 95. Yes.
I've had visions in that area too, but what I was understanding was like, go back to the old way of the Native American Indian way, because they knew how to survive. Without the electric.
You know,
All of the stuff.
that's
I was wondering, did you get the same?
okay. Let me put that a different way. Amongst the Indian people, that's always been the prophecy, is that the Indian will lead again in this area, That's not to say that they'll just up and lead just because they're Indian. What comes to me is what they do. The customs that they do is what's going to become prevalent in the next millennia. Not so much their lifestyle, not so much, going and making a hogan or something like that, but what they put into their prayers, how they do things, how they see things. That's what's going to lead. That's why I'm not afraid of sharing these things, what I know, with people. I'm one of those lazy Indians. The more I can share this, the less work I have to do. So, something like that. It's their perception of the universe, their perception of God, their perception of how everything comes under one. Like back where I'm from, we always advocate, the people I'm from always advocate what they call the law of one. In other words, everything comes together. What you do affects me, what I do affects you. We're in this together. There isn't no separation. In the same way in Indian language, everything is sort of from a we point. If you look at the Indian language, for those of you people that speak Indian language or Indian, you'll find that the language comes from a feeling point. And the reason for that is because it brings out the expression. It's a descriptive form of language for the simple reason that it has feeling in it. And to look at life from that view and to practice that kind of life, it's not that in the next millennia Indians are going to be, the governing board or something like that. No, it's not that. If Indian people were really to live, if Indian people were really to live up to their creed, they would freely share these things with you. They will share with you what they know from their heart. That way they can live up to their creed as Indian people. And that's what I mean about pipe carriers and people like me. We're at service to the people. We're not really on our own. People come to my house and knock on my door at 2:30 in the morning or whatever and say, "Pete, I want to talk with you." I have to get up and talk with these people. I don't come and say, "I'll come back tomorrow at 6:30. It's too cold," or something like that. We can't do that. Let me tell you something personal here. Years ago, I was not looking to get married. But somehow I ended up getting married. And I had these obligations to God. And I thought I could balance these obligations with God. When God and I talked on top of that mountain in 1982, my agreement with God is that I would do everything I can to do His work here on Mother Earth and to give God the best representation that I'm capable of in all aspects of what I do. And it was God first, nobody else. Then I got married. There were times that people asked me that there were times that I could have gone out there and done ceremonies, but I chose not to. I stayed with my family. There were times that people come and ask me to do things. I know in my heart that I could do more, but because of family, I didn't. It was a great marriage. One morning, we went to sleep, and the next morning we woke up, everything was gone. What we had between us was gone. It was like two strangers living in the same house. So she went to counseling, thinking it was all her fault, and I joined her for a few sessions, and then I said, no. We choose to divorce, and we did. And I've always done ceremonies for people or healing ceremonies for people that they ask me to do. And one time I went to this ceremony. I was asked to go do this ceremony. And I got over there and there was this younger guy that was there. And he said to me, "Pete, can I do that ceremony?" And I knew this guy. He was one of those up and coming ceremonial people. I said, "Sure, go for it." Then I asked him, I said, "Can I sit in your ceremony?" He said, "Sure." First he tried to ask me. I said, "No." I said, "It's okay. I'm just going to sit here." So for one of the very few times I was sitting in the ceremony, not leading the ceremony, but just sitting there, wondering what am I doing there. And then it dawned on me. Then I said, "Okay, God, you've always asked me to do ceremonies. You've always asked me to do things for people, and I've always done that to the best of my ability that I can. Now let me ask you, and I've never asked you anything in return, except that you take good care of me and my family. You've done that. But now let me ask you something. What happened to my marriage?" And before long, this thing came right to me. Like, "Hey, Pete, you and I had this agreement on top of the mountain, remember? Remember you said that you put me first? No, you said that, but you didn't. You gave me 20% of your time, of your life. That was not the agreement. If you had given me half of it or more than half, I'd be fine. You left me no choice. I tried to wake you up. You left me no choice but to take her from you. Now, you and I can continue on with this work." It was really a stupid thing for me not to have looked at it that way in the time when I was in that relationship. But that's what happens. That's what I mean when I talk about commitments, when I talk about what happens. There's no excuses in that. You make a commitment, you say something to God, God will hold you to your word. God is not going to say, "Well, it's too cold outside for you to go do the ceremony. It's cool. It's okay." No. It does not work that way. If that's what you say you're going to do, that's what you will do. If you do not, what will happen to you is something that happened to me, or either it will make you sick. If you vision yourself in a canister, a little bottle, if you put it that way, a cylinder, what comes out of you begins to go back and forth, energy, like your microwave does, one beam. That's what's going to make you sick, is that. It's your own doing, nobody else. Nobody else done anything to you except you. God is great. God is okay. It's an okay God, but we here on the earth need to realize that God also has a sense of humor and also can be very serious in our commitments, and they are nothing to be played with. That's why I always say to people, if you decide to do something, do it, make sure you know what you're doing though. Make sure you understand. Don't get hurt. Don't go through something like I did, and some of us are probably not the only one in this room that went through something like that the hard way. Then to go back and look back and say, I really messed it up. It was my own fault, nobody else's. Yes.
About ceremonies and talking to tribal people in this area that have real traditional ways, some feel that there is ways to misuse ceremonies. And I see a lot of ceremonies in Sedona that are called that, and they look kind of funny because they're not by traditional people, since I've seen the traditional ways. But I talk to the people doing them, and their intentions are good. They care. They want to pray. They want to bring the community together. And so it affects me because I've seen both. And so what I really feel is these people need to communicate more. The tribal people with the ancient ways, so much has been taken, they feel feel the taking is still going on, rather than look and see, these are young people that don't know that they're trying. Let's go help them. That's what I'd love to see. But instead they're feeling, maybe they're older and they don't want to come down the road. They're taking away from what we're trying to hold together, meaning the earth. They feel that these novices are actually harming. And that kind of frightens me. Or can you misuse a ceremony if the intentions are good? If you have no culture and no traditions, you see something and it looks right and you want to pray for the earth, so you try. So where's the balance?
Okay. Let me talk about what's here first before I talk about what people do. People who die who have not grieved their losses, in many cases are held to this plane with the karma that they have. When I talk about karma, levels of karma, if you look at 1 as really, really bad karma, if you look at 9 as sort of almost without karma, it does not matter what level of karma that they have, but if they have not grieved their losses, it weighs them down. And many of them do not leave this earth here. They're still here as souls. And also the people that all of a sudden somebody goes from behind them and they don't know that their guy puts a gun to their head and blows their head off, that they don't know that it's really that time. It's the shock of it. They don't know that they have died. They're still here. Also the karma of the land. California is a good example of that. What's going on in California is the result of what the karma of the land and the consciousness of the people that is on there. That's turning that. When I talk about purifying the earth, when I talk about smudging, if people will remember that and cleanse the area before they do anything, because of what they can evoke, like I talk about the spirit still there somewhere, okay? That's one side of the danger of ceremonies, is that. Another part of the danger of ceremonies is calling all the spirits from all the universe. Then when they're here, what do you do with them? You don't send them back. They're still here. If you call them and you don't send them back, when you're done with them, talking with them, they're still here. That's another part of it. So there are some being naive, I guess it's more in the sense of that area. So that's there other than what's in the individual's heart. With tribes, what I mean by, when I said earlier, if people, Indian people were to live up to their creed, that they would freely share everything they know. That's what I meant. Is to be able to come out here and share things that they know. I was one of the very first of what they call now spiritual runners in southern Arizona. They're like sun dancers, that kind of commitments. And we reburied all the people that we've gotten back from different museums or warehouses of our people over the years. We buried them the way they want to be buried. And also, I was the first one to leave them. I was actually relieved of my duties or my responsibility because I asked them to do something. And the reason that happened is because I was raised to believe that regardless of color, that we were all one family. And the Indian people, my own people, which I was a part of, thought that this particular ceremony was only for Indians. And with my ex-wife, we have a son who's half Anglo, or either Armenian, whatever, Anglo and Indian. And some of my sisters, my family, were all intermarried at one time or another. And that raised a real issue with me as a part of being a part of this group. And because they said that only Indian people go, and I was not raised that way. So I asked them to show me as to where in our teachings as Indian people does it say that these ceremonies are only for Indian. Is it part of our prophecy? Or where is it? I want them to show me. And if it was there that I had, over the years, may not have heard or were not taught, I would like to know. And they could not do it. But because of what they have as their own problems or personal issues, that's what guided them to decide that there was going to only be for Indian people. And when they decided that, I asked them, what are you going to do with me? I said, I can lead your ceremonies, I can do this, but I don't believe the same way you do. I'd be mocking you. And I was not about to be mocking God in any way. So they agreed to let me go. For that reason, what you're talking about. So not all Indian people are that way. If off reservation can ask the same question to Indian people, show me where in your prophecy, where does it say that this ceremony is only for Indian people, I think you have a point. Now with people who are here in Sedona, like Sweat Lodge, to me, all the Sioux Indian people I've spoke to over my years, I talked to just about all the spiritual gurus of Indian country. I have a good idea of what they're saying. The ones I really learned from was a guy by the name of Eddie Belrose out of Canada, and a guy by the name of Quiz Lopez out of Mexico, Hocholi, and a lady from southern Arizona by the name of Louisa Harvier. All the rest, I understand what they're saying. And I respect what they're saying. Is that amongst purification ceremonies, there's simple purification ceremonies. I came here last year to Sedona, and I found out there was a bear lodge over here, and there was an eagle lodge over there, and there was a lodge somewhere here that had 2 doors, which I've never heard about before. I think if we can stay with just a simple ceremony, I think Indian people will see the point of what people with sincerity are trying to do. I think that's what's going to bring them around to the point where they will share these things. But to make ceremonies other than what they're not, then I think that's the thing, that's one of the issues that I know that they have, is that. Because it never was a part of them. They were just simple ceremonies, purification ceremonies. And the reasoning for that is because animals are under a different kingdom. Birds are under a different kingdom. We're all under different kingdoms. Ceremonies have to do with the human kingdom, not the animal kingdom. Animals in ceremony was an honor of that kingdom. So you were to put a coyote lodge together, or something like that, what kingdom are you in? That's the issue that they have. We've talked about this, and I think that people should, if they don't know, they should just come out and say, well, I don't know. In the same way, this doesn't only apply to non-Indians, but this also applies to Indian people. A lot of us Indian people do not know these things either. Just because we're Indian does not mean we know these things. Understand that. I used to live in the Northwest. There was a good example of a survey that was done there in the early 80s of Indian people. It became if you put Indian people, say 100%, 20 people, 5%, one person, the old man that we all say that we have our grandfather, we Indian people all have a grandfather that knows all this, has all this wisdom, if you look at us in what we do. I mean, I joke about, maybe we do. I don't know. I have some grandfathers who just, let me put it this way. And the reason I laugh about it is because in my younger years after Vietnam, I was searching. And I spent about 3 or 4 years in a Catholic school when I was growing up. And I went back to the Catholics also and asked them, how can you help me change the way I feel? This is how deep what I did affected me. I was talking about Vietnam. What they suggested to me did not work, so I went to another place. To where I ran out of things. I went back to the old people. I started asking them about ceremonies. In the process of asking them for ceremonies, there's a saying amongst us Indian people that as we grow older, that we become wise. I found that to be untrue, that some of us just simply get old. That's what I'm talking about, is that not all of us have this, that not all of us have this grandfather who's on this. That's what I mean by that. That some of us simply get old. That there's only 1 in 20, if I put it that way, Indian people that have this type of knowledge, that have a sense of how that person's grandfather used to think and see things and believe in things. And I'm part of the baby boom group, probably part of the very beginning. So I'm talking about people before me. Excuse me, that maybe add another 20 years to me or something like that, that these people, 1 in every 20 of those people still see the way their grandparents think. These are people that we all talk about. That's what I'm basing this on, is that there are not many to go around. So maybe a lot of us do not have that. That's 1% or 5%, 1 person out of 20. 3 people out of the 20 completely assimilated to whatever values, cultures they chose to. It is their right to do this as you and I have the right to lead our lives in the fashion that we choose to. 3 people, 15%. 60%, 12 people out of the 20. You go and ask them, what are your customs? What is your tradition? What are your traditions? What is your culture? What they tell you may not be the truth. What they tell you they may heard from somewhere, or they read in a book, or they'll make it up. 12. And we took the 12 people and then we broke it down into 5 different characters also. And to get a further understanding of our own people as to what we have become in contemporary times. Then the other 3 next to the 60% are highly educated Indians. These are the Indians with the doctorate, the masters or whatever, that they put all their marbles in this one bag. They got this degree, then there's no marching bands or either. Nothing happened. So they're starting to come back to ceremonies. And they're learning, they're making their mistakes, they're coming around. But there's that one also that understands what this other old man thinks, the way he understands, the way he sees things. So when I lecture other Indians, that's what I try to make grow, is that 5%. Because these people can live anywhere. They can survive on the reservation, they can survive off the reservation, and they're not prejudiced. And I think, though, that's one of the hardest things that they've ever also had to work through, is their own prejudice. And that's, so they don't, I heard the term bashing, bashing, I forgot what race they were talking about one time that other people talk about. They simply just come across and share these things with you. So that gives you an idea of what I'm talking about as Indians, that some of us know this and some of us do not. And the majority of people that raise all these questions, well, you're just a white person, you cannot do the ceremony, normally comes out of the 60%. You have to think about that. These are the people that don't know themselves. What it really takes to be spiritual. When the American Indian movement first came out, I came out of Vietnam. I was over there in the San Francisco area with the hippies and the Indians over there and all that stuff. I was out there looking for myself too. Until it dawned on me what that meant, so I came home. But but with the movement at the time, I used to joke with them. Those people we still know each other. I used to say this is a spiritual movement, and we'd be in the bar drinking and shooting pool. I used to ask them for a spiritual movement, and what are you doing in this bar? And they get all mad at me for saying that. But anyway, there's some humor into this. Yes, I believe that when people do ceremonies, how they do it is really individual. That's the freedom of religion. That's the freedom of spirituality. In the way that I was taught, as anybody in my family were taught, that my relationship between God and me is between God and me, nobody else. In ceremonies, that's where that comes from, is there. And how I do it, it comes from here. And if somebody disagrees with how I do it, that's their problem, not me. And to me, that's how people should look at ceremonies. When they do ceremonies, if they're not Indian, regardless of color, and they do ceremonies, and if they're sincere, if they're in that space, that's where they should stay. And what people say should not matter. And that I encourage, that I respect. But if there's a lot of ego in that ceremony, people like me can feel it. That here, having ego, to me, is playing with God. And when they do that, then they should also be prepared to suffer the consequences of doing something like that. And this is now, it's not something like a feather on anybody's cap or anything, like notch on my gun or anything like that to be able to do ceremonies. No, it's just something that some of us can do. If somebody like to do it, fine, with all sincerity, more power to them. That's, I have nothing against them. So on both sides, if people don't understand, they should go out there and ask also. I don't see anybody from Sedona coming to my house and say, Pete, hey, can you show me some things? Can I talk with you? Can I have something? Can I be able to do what you do? No, nobody came to me. It was because of my obligation to the world, to the human family, that I came here to Sedona. Because I know people come here. Like I said, I'm lazy. I don't want to do all this traveling from different places. I want to come to where people come too, so that way everybody's there when I'm there and they're all leave when I get. That's the reason I came here. The first place is that. And also, that should extend the same way to non-Indians. If non-Indians wants to come out there and ask. I caution you, though, on one thing. Indian people know that most Anglos are very inquisitive. They want to know everything within a limited time. Like, by 5 o'clock, I want to know all this. Okay? Indian people see time different. And so when they see you, come to them. There's a little question that comes out here in the back of their heads that says, what do they want now? Because our experience over the years is that when most Anglos come to us, they want something. That's been our experience. So, if you go over there and start asking all these questions, they're going to look at you and say, another one of them. You've lost your chance. Because there's another one right behind you. If you go there, just go out there, hang around them. Just get to know them. Just get to know them. Once they know that you're just another person, hanging around them, they'll give you more than you can handle. Because they know at that point you don't want anything from them. They'll show you these things. That's the mistake that most non-Indians make, is that. If you're going to do that, that's the way to do it. Go get to know them. Go hang around them. Without judgment. How they live, that's their business. Hang around them. Make friends with them. Once they realize you don't want anything from them, they'll give you all. You can go live with them if that's what you want to do. That's the whole key to that, because of their experience. So the only reason I come out here is because of my obligation to God. And also in the late 80s, people told me we were at a gathering in the village where I'm from with half of the reservation that had to do with ceremonies, and I was the one that probably was complaining the most, that people come to the Phoenix Valley from different tribes and tell all these things to people in the Phoenix Valley, then they leave. Then they leave us holding the bag, and we're the ones that have to suffer the consequences of what happens or how we are perceived. And that was the issue that I was raising, is that. So they told me, well, Pete, get out there and share with these people what you know from here on. So for the first time, on about 88, I stepped out off the reservation for the first time to share some of the things. And I think there's only about 3 or 4 of us from that reservation that were actually instructed to do these things. So I'm out here, I'm at your service, and you're more welcome to know what I know. There's some things I'm not covering, just take the time, we'll sit down and talk. That's fine with me. That's what I'm here for. But also I extend the same invitation to you. Get out there and ask these Indian people what you want to know in a good way. If there's something, if you want to know how certain things about ceremonies, ask them. We know that it took me years. I'm in my late 40s here, and I've been in ceremonies for the past 20-some years. Then there was this 20-year block between there, and there's this other years way at the bottom, close to 30 years of that. And there's a lot of things that I wish today that I had a chance to sit and really listen as people tell me things when I was growing up. Simple things I remember, like I was raised on 3 principles. I was told by my family and the people there, the old people, that if I can have love in my heart, if I can have compassion, and if I can have patience, I'm in good harmony, good relations with God. That's all I need to do. That's all I need to have, is the 3 things. But those principles I was raised by. To this day, I believe that they were right. I don't have to set all these rules, but if I can love people, things out there, everything God's creation, if I can be compassionate, if I can have the patience, I'll be fine. With that, I thank you for being patient and listening to me. You probably say, when this guy is going to quit talking here? And there's some other speakers, and I'm sure that a lot of them is going to talk about the way things are done. One of the things I go back to when I started this, before I leave you here, are customs. Customs of people. Down where I'm from, everything we do is counterclockwise. A lot of the ceremonies we do is counterclockwise. Our dances are that way. Many of them go opposite. A lot of things that we do in the Phoenix Valley are very similar to the Mayan people, to the Hocholi, to the Aztec in that area. Everything from there on, Apache country up this way, are very similar to the Midwestern tribes. So you have to make that distinction. And also the Indian people, the customs, the food that we have, the ceremonies that we have, how we do them, where we do them, who can do them, the different standings within the ceremonial arena, and the medicine culture, the shamans, the medicine men, the pipe carriers, all these people are really at your service. They're not leaders. They're at your service. And also, the foods, the songs, all that, those are all gifts to people. Traditions are principles by which we live by. The very same principles. This is what we have in common with the human family. If you can maintain that, you can differentiate these things, that way you're learning. You're seeing where they're coming from. And also that, like I said, not all of us know things. Go by how you feel as you listen to these people. Feel what they say. Not hear what they say, but feel what they say. You can be able to pinpoint where they're coming from. In the same way with ceremonies. You go to a ceremony, feel it out. If it feels good, go in there. If it doesn't feel right, maybe you're better off not going in there. That's your choice. Simple things like that. With that, hey, thank you.